Chapter 4 Ghosts and Thunder. They left the ruined rings facility in a heavy silence. Even Sandar, usually attuned to thoughts like a tuning fork to vibration, walked quietly, fingers twining behind his back, eyes downcast. No one spoke. What was there to say? The revelation still echoed, that both Eloi and Morlock were, in the end, manufactured. Artifacts, legacy experiments of a long-dead hand. The trek back toward the Time Rider was uneventful. Alex led for the last few meters. He knew where he had hidden his craft. As they neared the clearing where he'd first arrived, tension tickled the back of his neck. It was irrational, maybe. He'd left it camouflaged, well hidden, but the fear was there nonetheless. They pushed through the last thicket, boots sinking slightly into the mossy earth, and there it was, exactly as he'd left it. Camouflage netting still draped over the squat, ugly shape of the hovercraft. The quartz rods along its frame caught the evening light, shimmering like fractured rainbows. Alex let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Still here. George nodded, giving the machine a glance. "Let's tool up," Alex said, pulling the netting aside. From one of the storage lockers behind the cockpit, he retrieved what he'd come for, a pair of Glocks, neatly wrapped in oiled cloth, with spare magazines snapped into a foam-lined case. From another bin came a med kit, sealed in its hard case, and tucked beside it a set of NVGs, old military surplus, bulky but functional. He handed one of the pistols to George. "You've handled a revolver, yeah?" George raised an eyebrow. "A Webley, once or twice. How different can it be?" "Fair warning, a lot." Alex checked the magazine, racked the slide with a satisfying clack, and handed it over grip first. "Point it, squeeze, nothing fancy. Safety's here, and keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire." He showed him the proper trigger discipline. George turned it in his hands, weighing it. "Neat little thing. 17-round magazine, beats the hell out of 6 shots," informed Alex, loading and unloading his own sidearm, racking the slide, peering down the barrel from the angle of the ejection port. "You don't say." George was a quick study. He was already ejecting the mag, reinserting, racking the slide, aiming. An absolute natural with mechanicals, and it felt good for him to play with metal and mechanisms again. Alex thought about offering him the shotgun, or the M4 carbine tucked further in the kit. But no, this wasn't the place for heavy firepower. Not yet. Not until he knew what the day held. Something smaller, more discreet, in case someone forgets their manners, as Charlie would have put it. "Will it put down a Morlock?" Alex asked, as casually as asking if the rain would hold. George snorted. "Alex, they're not superhuman. As strong as they are ugly, sure, but even a well-swung club will do the job." Secretly relieved, Alex tucked his own pistol into the waistline of his combats and slung the medkit into a backpack over his shoulder. "Right," George said, straightening. "Northeast. 2, maybe 3 hours hike, give or take." 2 or 3 hours. It took us half a day to get to the rings from the river. Alex was confused. "We aren't going home. Since this is a bit of an educational jaunt, I think we should take you to see some friends of ours," replied George. "Friends?" asked Alex. George explained. "The Eloi aren't the only people here in future England. It would appear that sometime between the recording of the rings and now, some sort of offshoot of the Eloi emerged. They call themselves Humoi? I'll explain that later, and look almost identical to their Eloi cousins. But the similarity stops there. Where our Eloi are apathetic, docile, innocent for the most part, the Humoi are wild, nomadic, and very, very free with their opinions. Of course, I didn't discover them until after I came back for Wiener. They are a warrior people, from somewhere on the European continent originally, I suspect, judging by their accents. They have survived the eons-long Morlock domination, and they have become quite adept at it. Pure survival of the fittest stuff. This was a revelation. Different kinds of Eloi. Alex was intrigued. He began to prepare the Time Rider for normal cross-country travel, but George put a hand on his arm. "We aren't taking the hovercraft?" Alex asked, arching a brow. George shook his head. "Saves fuel. I'm sure you've a limited supply and, well," he gestured vaguely, "doesn't do to terrify the locals if we don't have to." Before they set out, George ensured a message was sent to the riverfolk. He sent the 2 riverfolk who had accompanied them, fleet-footed, practical souls whose presence in the community often balanced the passivity of their kin. They would inform the river camp of George's temporary departure, and that trade would continue as normal. "They're good people, the Eloi. No bad in them at all," George remarked as he watched the runners vanish along the forest trail. "Fellows like these runners in particular, without them the others wouldn't last a season. Food doesn't just fall from the sky. After we destroyed the Morlocks, who basically tended these people, fed them and clothed them, there was no one to care for them until I taught them the basics. I gave them tools, trade, something like independence, but I couldn't give them a spine. Not really, that has to grow on its own. The ones who can fish, hunt, build, they'll make it. Some already are. But there are always those who will slip through, the ones too apathetic or too changed by what they endured. After I discovered the Humoi clans, I engineered a trading arrangement that benefited everyone, but especially my riverfolk friends. I also showed them how to hunt and to get fish from the river. I was no fisher, but with their psychic ability they were able to pull information from my brain I didn't realize was in there and use it to their benefit. Remarkable, really. I considered fashioning some rudimentary rifles for them, but I didn't want to be a new Prometheus or Ares and introduce war to this world. It has seen enough, even by our own era. "You really think what you built is enough?" Alex asked. George considered that. "It's a start, and I didn't see anyone else stepping up." They set off. At first, the trail was little more than a deer track, winding through dense undergrowth. Trees, some thicker than redwoods, loomed on either side, their trunks gnarled and knotted, their roots swallowing stone, bone, anything foolish enough to resist the creep of centuries. They were cresting a low ridge when Sandar slowed, his gaze locking on something in the near distance. "There," he murmured, voice oddly hollow. At first, Alex didn't see it. Then the shape resolved, a figure, walking. No, drifting. A woman, thin to the point of translucence. Her pale hair hung in matted ropes down her back. Her feet moved without direction, toes tracing lines in the dust. Her arms hung limp at her sides. Not watching, not sensing, not there. She passed them at no more than 10 feet, eyes open but unseeing. She stumbled over a rock and then continued on her way, as though some pitiless force guided her body long after her mind had gone. Alex's voice dropped. "What the—" Sandar's expression was unreadable. Not alarmed, not shocked. He'd obviously seen this before. "Out here," he said quietly. "You sometimes find them. Ones who never came home after a Morlock raid. Not dead, not captured, just left behind in this state." "Traumatized?" Alex asked, though the guess felt wrong even as he said it. Sandar shook his head. "No trauma, no pain, just silence. Their minds are gone, caught between the pull of a siren and the tones that usually wake Eloi again. That never came." George sighed behind him. "A psionic misfire. It happens. Rare, but it happens." Alex watched the woman step through the grass, utterly unheeding of stones underfoot, their presence, anything. His hand tightened into a fist. "Sandar, can't you?" He gestured helplessly. "You can break the trance, right? Just snap her out of it? Sandar didn't answer at first. He was watching her, really watching her. Not like someone observing an animal, but like someone inspecting the fracture lines in an already shattered vase. His voice was quieter when it came. She's too far gone. Alex turned toward him. How can you know that? Her body's starved, mind degraded. She's been like this for years, perhaps. I could pull her back. I could force her back, but... He paused, gaze still on her. It would be cruel. There'd be nothing left but a broken thing gasping for air. George's reply was softer, tinged with a bitter edge. It would be like waking someone from a coma, just to watch them die screaming. The woman drifted past, oblivious, her shadow stretching long across the silvered grass. No fear, no awareness, just motion, a clock that ticked without hands to tell the time. Sandar's face stayed still, but something dark flickered in his eyes. Sometimes, he murmured, sometimes, the most humane thing is to let the silence keep them. Alex swallowed. His jaw clenched tight. He turned back towards the fading figure and watched her slowly disappear over the ridge. Maybe, he muttered. We could have put her out of her misery. George, disappointed, said, You aren't unarmed. Why didn't you? You say you saved them, Father, Sandar murmured, watching the woman disappear into the brush. And maybe you did, but some of them never left the pits. They trekked on. The sun hung low now, a sullen red smear against the horizon. As they climbed a ridgeline, the landscape opened, a wide valley stretched beneath them, draped in shades of bronze and shadow. And there, distant but unmistakable, was the Humoi camp. Even from this far, the contrast was sharp. No graceful terraces or bridges of woven reed like the Eloi. Instead, crude palisades of timber, watchtowers lashed from felled trees, great pillars of smoke rising from open fires. And the movement, horses, dozens of massive beasts, their riders weaving between lines of tents, longhouses, and scaffolded platforms. The clang of hammers carried on the wind. Voices, raised, arguing, laughing, singing, drifted faintly up the slope. As they descended, details sharpened. Hide-draped lean-tos sat beside timber lodges, stacks of firewood, racks of spears, rows of drying meat. Children ran between legs and horses with the chaotic indifference only children possess. It was good to see something so normal. The scent hit next. Wood smoke, sweat, leather, dung, and something roasting over flame. Strong, earthy, alive. George gestured ahead. This is the other side of Eloi humanity. A sprawling chaos of tents, timber longhouses, and hide-draped shelters stretched across the valley below. Unlike the Eloi villages, which felt more like tranquil garden temples, this place pulsed with noise and life. Wood smoke curled into the copper-tinted sky. Somewhere, metal rang against metal, hammers on anvils. Voices rose in arguments, laughter, and the occasional barked order. More horses, big ones, towering beasts closer to shire horses than anything Alex knew from home. Massive shoulders, broad chests, thick feathered legs, built less for speed, more for hauling, fighting, surviving. Men and women rode them as if born in the saddle, weaving between campfires and corrals. George gestured with his staff. The Humoi, they call themselves that, took the name after I explained where they came from. His voice softened. Human. Eloi. Humoi. Their joke. Or self-depreciation. Take your pick. The three of them started down the slope. Alex adjusted his grip on the strap of his pack, glancing sideways. So, what exactly is the etiquette? Simple, George said. Your family, my family. That carries weight. Don't lie. Don't posture. Say what you mean. Do what you say you will. Be useful. They value that. And if someone offers you a drink, well, brace yourself. Message received. Alex muttered. He still had PTSD from some of his Uncle Charlie's homebrew concoctions and some of his student escapades in London. As they crossed into the camp proper, heads began to turn. Conversations faltered. Tools lowered. Dozens of eyes, sharp, bright, assessing, tracked the strangers. The effect was immediate, like walking into a biker bar in a bad part of town. A few men nodded to George. One slapped a companion's arm and pointed, grinning. George's arrival brought waves of recognition, a scattering of greetings. Respect. But where George was greeted with open camaraderie, Sandar received far more cautious, begrudging nods. Tolerated. Nothing more. Alex felt it too, the weight of scrutiny. They didn't know this oddly dressed stranger. Then a voice rang out, a woman's, clipped, accented differently than the lilting tones of the Eloi. Well, look what the dog dragged back. Alex turned. She was astride one of the massive horses, blonde hair braided back, a bow slung across her back. Sharp-featured, but not delicate, cheekbones like blades, eyes clear, piercing. This woman was stunning, and she controlled her beast without the reins like she was born in the saddle. Everything about her approach telegraphed a kind of casual dominance that made it clear she needed no permission from anyone for anything. A smile, genuine, fond, flashed toward George, but when her gaze slid to Alex, it shifted. Cool, appraising. Before she could turn it into full disdain, a flicker of something passed through her eyes. Curiosity, maybe. Maybe. Sandar, for his part, might as well have been invisible. "Fira?" George greeted with a grin, spreading his arms. "Still not kicked out for bad behavior, I see." She swung off the horse with fluid grace, landing light on her feet despite the thick boots. "They tried." "Greetings, son of the honored one, George." She addressed Sandar, if only because etiquette demanded it. Sandar responded in kind in his effortlessly neutral tone. "Greetings, Fira." She slapped the horse's flank. It wandered off toward the watering trough. Only then did she really turn to face Alex. "This one's new. He's certainly not Eloi." George nodded. "Family. From my time." That changed everything. A ripple passed through the nearby onlookers. Suspicion softened, interest sharpened. A few murmurs. "Family?" rolled through the cluster of onlookers. Fira raised a brow, arms folding. "Family, you say? Well, any family of yours." She paused, weighing him a moment longer. "We'll see if he deserves half the respect we give you." Alex managed a half smile. "Charmed." Behind her, one of the men, thick-armed, scar across one cheek, stepped forward, offering his hand. "Family of George is family of ours," he declared, loud enough for the surrounding camp to hear, "so long as he pulls his weight." Alex took the hand, the grip hard enough to test, but not quite crush. "Deal." "I am Haska, honored warrior of the Humoi," the human tank declared. "I am Alex of Housewells," replied Alex, trying to sound important. "Any kin of George?" A grizzled older woman added from a fireside, "Better be ready for trouble. Always follows him like a bad smell." Laughter rippled around them. Fira smirked, but it didn't quite reach her eyes when she glanced sideways at Alex. "Are you a fighter?" Alex shrugged, nonchalant. "Of a sort." George chuckled. "Don't let him fool you. He's a warrior in his own world." That caused a stir. A few of the onlookers straightened. One whistled low. A man near the forge let out a barked laugh. "I could snap him like a chicken bone." Alex kept his expression neutral. What was he supposed to say? That his warrior credentials were mostly a weekend gig with the territorial army, some long hikes, and a lot of paperwork. And then he'd have to explain what a weekend was, and that was a headache for another time. Better to let them assume. And it didn't take long. A woman with red-dyed braids gave a low whistle. Look at the stranger. What skin is that? Some kind of bark cloth? She pointed at his combats. Another frowned. No fur. No clan marks, not even a belt blade. And those feet, what are those? Hooves. He pointed at the soles of Alex's boots. Several laughed, but it wasn't kind. A third stepped forward, broad-shouldered and bearing a scar like a claw mark across his neck. "He's no warrior," the man said flatly. "No axe, no bow, no knife, no cord, no proof of hunt, nothing." He looked directly at George. "You brought us a warrior. Then where is his weapon?" The murmurs behind him rippled into open skepticism. Several hands rested on spear shafts. Others leaned forward, waiting to see if the odd-clothed outsider would flinch. Fira, arms crossed, studied Alex with her head slightly tilted. "No hide, I know," she said, tapping her finger against his vest. "No beast, I know, either." What people send a man dressed like this to fight? Alex glanced at George, then at Sandar, who said nothing. It was his to answer. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate. From the waistband of his combats, he drew the Glock. No flourish, no threat, just the clean, purposeful movement of someone doing something he'd done 100 times before. The nearest warriors took half steps back, confused, not afraid, not yet. The weapon didn't look like a blade, didn't gleam like steel. It was black, unadorned, too small to be dangerous. Alex racked the slide. The sharp metallic clack made a few flinch. Then he turned, raised the Glock toward a lichen-covered post near the edge of the camp, and fired. Crack! The sound thundered. The post exploded in a burst of wood pulp and splinters. Horses reared and whinnied. Birds took flight in a panicked flurry from the treetops. Somewhere a dog barked and then fell silent. When the echo faded, Alex holstered the weapon like nothing had happened. "That's where my weapon is," he said, calm and cold. Silence gripped the camp. The man with the scar stared at the obliterated post, then at Alex. His jaw shifted. Then he laughed. "Thunder, in his hands," he exclaimed. George gave a dry chuckle. "And that's just the little one." That earned a few glances. Fira stepped forward again, slowly, eyes on Alex. "Strange skins. Stranger weapon." She gave a half-smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We'll see what kind of man wears both." George clapped his hands once. "Well, I suppose that's one way to make an impression, old boy." Food was brought, steaming dishes he'd never seen before, but was amazing. No additives, no artificial anything. Come to think of it, Alex wasn't even sure what kind of meat this was and frankly was afraid to ask. He was afraid to ruin the enjoyment of a meal he hadn't had delivered to him by some stranger on a moped. Once, he caught Fira looking. Or maybe she caught him. Hard to tell. Something sharp in her gaze, measuring, amused. She was beautiful, of course. They all were. But there was fire in her that made her stand out. He shoved the thought aside. Nope, don't even start. This isn't anything. His brain knew better. His pulse, less so. After the communal meal, the din quieted somewhat as the older clan heads shifted into what George had already warned Alex to expect. Politics after. This wasn't the structured governance of parliaments or councils. This was the messy, raucous dance of clan alliances, rivalries, and loud voices trying to outshout each other over fire and ale. George leaned slightly toward Alex as they sat cross-legged at the long central table. "Best advice," he murmured. "Don't offer opinions unless directly asked. This isn't a debate. It's theatre, and dominance display." "Sounds like Parliament." Alex deadpanned. "Exactly, except these people will skin you alive with axes, not taxes." Voices rose around them. A burly man with a half-shaved scalp slammed a drinking horn on the table, jabbing a finger toward a wiry elder whose braids hung with bone charms. "They took Risa. Third one this season. We should have wiped that nest out a year ago." A chorus of angry agreements rumbled in response. Another rose stiffly, taller, leaner, face craggy with age. "And lose half doing it again? You think they don't have teeth waiting in those tunnels?" "One less of us is one more of them," a younger woman growled. Fira spoke for the first time since entering, her voice cutting cleanly through the layered arguments. "Waiting solves nothing. Talking solves nothing. There's only one language they understand." Several heads turned toward her. Some nodded. Others frowned. One grizzled elder spat into the fire. "Easy for you, girl. You don't have sons to lose." Fiera didn't even flinch. "No, I don't, because I ride with the warriors, and I make sure no Morlock gets within 10 miles of us on my watch." A ripple passed through the gathered crowd. Admiration, irritation, a little of both. George leaned sideways to Alex again. "They like her. Fear her a little too. Both are useful." "Noted." Alex murmured, not quite managing to avoid letting his gaze drift toward Fira again. Another voice chimed in, a heavy-set man with braided grey hair and the bearing of someone used to winning arguments by sheer volume. "What of them?" He jabbed a thumb in the Wellses' direction. "Are you here to look on, or to stand with those you call kin?" The firelight caught the white of George's eyes as he straightened, only mildly annoyed, but dialing it up to play the part in their ritual back and forth. "When have you ever known me to sit idly by, Galen?" A few grunted affirmations of that. Galen's gaze shifted, narrowing. "And the other. Bloodkin, you say, but we've never seen him before, never fought beside him." George looked over at Alex, who simply shrugged. His voice, when it came, was even, steady. "I didn't come 800,000 years just to watch." Fira noted his response, one brow tilting up slightly. "He's a warrior," George added, simply. "His own world has different battles, different rules, but make no mistake, he's fought." Alex didn't correct the record. He didn't feel like explaining the part-time nature of the territorial army or the difference between field exercises and real war. Sure, he was taught many valuable things by an ex-SAS officer and survivalist, but frankly the more he listened to these people, the more he realized it didn't matter. A fight was a fight, whether it was in mud, concrete, or across time itself. The heavy-set man, Galen, grunted. "Good. We welcome the man with thunder in his hands. I only hope he has some in his heart, too." Husker wrapped it up. "It's settled. The Morlock hive plaguing us must die. If the elders approve, we go at first light." A ripple of approval circled the gathering. Fists thumping tables, boots stamping. Someone loosed a feral roar. Tension faded as the atmosphere changed from one of debate to entertainment, with people dispersing and regrouping into knots of friends, family, or lovers. A woman, a warrior, with visibly Olympian levels of fitness by 21st century standards, thought it no shame to be acting as a serving girl for the evening. She handed George and Alex horns full of Humoy moonshine. George offered Alex a sidelong glance, one that carried something between a grin and a grimace. "Well," he said quietly, "looks like we're in." Sandar, ever the spectator of behaviors and responses, tilted his head with a sigh. "Of course we are," he murmured, as though it were the most inevitable thing in the world. He knew his father enjoyed a chance to deal a blow to the Morlocks, however much he convinced himself it was merely a necessary evil. He despised them, too, so there would be no objections from him. The camp had become alive in a way Alex hadn't yet seen. Fires flickered across the gathering spaces, casting shifting shadows over bodies in motion. The Humoi, warriors and women alike, moved with a kind of primal grace, joyful and fierce, dancing, as their laughter rolling like distant musical waves across the clearing. Men beat drums, played trilling triple pipes. Women spun in wide circles, their blonde hair catching the firelight, muscles taut and fluid beneath tunics woven with color and pride. They laughed, taunted, flirted, choosing and challenging the warriors with sharp smiles and quicker wits. Alex could only watch, struck by the raw vitality of it all. Not the refined artifice of his own world's parties, but something older, truer. Alex found himself beside Fiera. She stood motionless, arms crossed, watching as well. Her face lit by the fire was unreadable. "Don't you want to join them?" Alex asked, keeping his voice light, almost teasing. She didn't look at him. Her answer came flat, as though shaped long ago and worn smooth by time. "I wasn't made for that." A pause. The music carried on without them. "Or maybe I wasn't allowed to be." The words hung there, begging for elaboration. Alex, emboldened perhaps by the Humoi moonshine, gave a wry smile. "Doesn't seem like anyone's able to forbid you anything now." She was silent. He should have stopped there. But the firelight, the laughter, the Humoi rocket fuel, it made him reckless in a way that felt good. So he smiled with a hint of challenge and said, "I would be honored if I could have this dance with you." He meant it playfully, flirtatiously, a bit of human foolishness to break ice. Fiera turned to him then, slow and sharp as a blade drawn in silence. Her eyes caught his, clear, guarded, and filled with something he couldn't put a finger on. For a moment he thought she might laugh, or strike him, or say yes? Instead, without a word, she turned and walked away from him. He blinked after her, confused, the chill of her absence suddenly cutting through the warmth of the night. He turned to go, but found one of the Humoi women, yet another born to war as much as the dance. She was tall, laughing kindly at him and watching him with a knowing smile. She raised a brow, clearly amused. "Bold move, newcomer," she said, voice light but edged with meaning. "Choosing our Fiera before the fires." "Choosing?" Alex asked, still confused. The woman chuckled softly, as though speaking to a child. A man who asks a woman to dance on festival night names her above all others. It's no game. He considered this new information. "Is that so? May I ask your name?" "I am known as Leora." "Thank you, Leora," Alex said, letting out a resigned breath. "Something tells me I may need your counsel again before long." "I doubt it not, honored stranger." Leora smiled almost sympathetically, even as her friends dragged her back to the festivities. Later, at a nearby fire, George sat, poking with a stick, watching the flames dance. Alex finished the last gulp of whatever unholy fermentation passed as a relaxing drink among these Humoi, and dropped himself down onto a log left out as firewood. "You know, your notes were pretty impressive, George. The schematics, the theory, all of it, but your friends seemed so skeptical of your account. I'm amazed. I'm sure they were intelligent men. What happened?" George needed no time machine for this trip down memory lane. "They sat and listened to the whole thing, you know. Philby, Hillier, Bridewell, Kemp. All of them, brandy in hand, faces caught somewhere between amusement and pity. A little tribunal of comfortable men, snug in the warmth of their own certainties." He gave a thin smile. Kemp went first, naturally, cold as ever. Temporal travel, he said, clipped and sharp. "Come now, George. You build clever toys, I grant you. But this is fantasy." He poked the fire, the sparks crackling in answer. Bridewell laughed, not cruelly. He wasn't cruel, but dismissively. "Theoretical gymnastics. A wonderful fiction, to be sure. You've been shut in your laboratory too long, man. Get some air." A pause, the faintest sigh. And Hillier, dear Hillier, could diagnose a fever but not a dream. He offered his cure. George's voice dropped into an impression, soft and clinical. "You're exhausted, George. Let me get you some laudanum. Overworked minds spin marvels. Rest. You'll see clearer in the morning." He let that sit for a moment, the quiet stretching between them. But Philby, dear old Philby, he alone hesitated. George glanced at Alex then, one brow raised, half in humour, half in pain. Philby sat there, glass forgotten in his hand, looking at me like a man torn between the world he knew and the man he trusted. "If anyone were mad enough to build such a thing," he said, managing a smile, "bless him, it would be you." He gave a quiet chuckle, dry as dust. And then softer, almost to himself, he said, "Or wise enough." But no one answered that. Easier to call it madness than face the truth that their little lives were perched on the edge of something vast and dark beyond their reckoning. Beyond my reckoning, and I've been living it for 20 years or so. George's voice softened, eyes distant. Even when I came back, coat torn, hands bloodied, smoke in my lungs, and the dust of dead centuries in my boots, they met me not with belief, but with ill-hidden disbelief, wrapped in a veneer of concern. He slipped into character, mimicking the voices of his old friends from so long ago. "You've had an ordeal, George," George recalled, in Hillier's gentle tones. "A waking dream," as Bridewell soothed. And Kemp, with all the warmth of winter stone, "Harumph! Delusion!" He let the word fall like ash. Only Philby stayed after the others left, poured me a drink with shaking hands, said, "I don't know what I believe, but I know you, George, and that counts for something." George smiled faintly, gaze lost in the fire. He tried. God bless him, he tried. But even Philby couldn't make the leap then, and I'm glad. Had he truly believed I could hurl myself across time, he would have done his utmost to prevent it. The smile faded. I imagine it took losing me to find his faith. He concluded. Alex was quiet for a while. Then, without looking up from the fire, he said, "I'd have believed you." George gave a dry chuckle. "I rather doubt that." "Maybe not at first." Alex shrugged. "But I'd have built the bloody thing myself just to prove you wrong." George laughed, shifted position, then looked around. "Where's the lovely Fira?" Alex rubbed the back of his neck and exhaled a massive sigh. George cocked an eyebrow. "You look like a man who's either won a battle or lost one. I can't quite tell which." Alex forced a lopsided grin. "Depends on your definition of victory." He paused, then confessed. "I asked her to dance." George blinked, then gave a small, knowing huff. "Ah, I see. And how did that look through the lens of Humoy tradition, I wonder? Apparently I've just proposed courtship. Publicly, in front of half the tribe." He scrubbed a hand through his hair. "I thought I was just being charming." George gave a low chuckle, deep and warm. "A man who unleashes forces he doesn't understand usually ends up surprised by what explodes in his face." Alex let out a soft laugh, shaking his head. George leaned back, stretching his legs toward the heat of the embers. "But then again," he said softly, "some explosions are worth it." Alex looked down, quiet for a moment, watching the flames curl and crackle. George gave a small, thoughtful nod, eyes still fixed on the fire. I suppose then the only thing left is to decide if you're the sort of man who runs from his own words. Alex raised a brow. Meaning? George sipped from his horn, a wry smile ghosting his lips. Meaning it's no bad thing to choose, even if you're not ready for the answer. Did you have someone back home? No someone for me. Living your legacy made me somewhat of a leper among the fairer sex. Thanks for that, by the way. Alex deadpanned. I didn't ask anyone to follow me, protested George. If you had trouble with the ladies, that's on you, my boy. They laughed together. Go. Find her, insisted George, not looking over. Before your courage cools and your better judgment ruins it. Alex gave a dry, grateful smile and rose, brushing soot from his hands. Right. George poked at the fire, embers crackling softly. You should know. She wasn't raised like the others. Father killed in some battle. Mother lost to the Morlocks. Olin, the leader of a sort, he took her in, raised her like a son, like a soldier. Duty, survival, vigilance. It was all he knew. So that's all she knows now. He leaned back, gaze distant. The other girls, they learned how to laugh and dance and tease. She learned how to fight, how to lead. George smiled faintly. But it doesn't mean she never wondered what it might be like to be one of them. A man who could respect that woman's strength, but give her a safe place to be the woman she very much is, could reap singular rewards, he said with a glint in his eye. Alex nodded thoughtfully. Noted. Wish me luck, Uncle. George made a wordless, oh, you'll need it face. He turned and walked back towards the river, steeling himself. George watched him go, the firelight dancing in his eyes. Ah, youth, he muttered to himself. A terrible affliction. Wouldn't go back there even if I could. Oh, wait. He finished the dregs of his drink. I suppose I could. George tossed the drinking horn and rose heavily to find a place to sleep for the night. Still later that night, Alex found Fira again, quite by accident. He has gone looking for a place to relieve himself, away from the fires, down by the river's edge, where the festival's laughter faded into the night wind. She was standing on a rock, arms loose at her sides now, looking out across the dark water. He approached carefully, boots crunching softly on the stone. I seem to have stepped in it, Alex said, voice low, unguarded. Though I'm still not sure where it is. She didn't turn, but he saw the corner of her mouth tighten. Not quite a smile. Not yet. Leora explained it. He offered, lamely. I know. He frowned slightly, genuinely puzzled. How could you? Finally she glanced at him, a small ghost of a smile passing like a shadow. I'm a hunter, a tracker. I listen. I watch. She paused, her voice softening slightly. You could do worse than Leora. She is a fine woman. Many men speak of her. Alex shook his head, his voice quiet but firm. I didn't ask her to dance. I asked you. It may mean more to your people to ask than it does to mine, but I wouldn't choose differently. That caught her off guard. She stared at him, the sharpness in her gaze softening just a fraction. You should be careful where you aim your words, Alex Wells. Maybe, he said, tilting his head, but I don't take these ones back. A moment passed. Then Fira looked back at the water. I'm not ready to be chosen, especially by a stranger with nothing but a good name and the clothes on his back. Alex replied coolly, I'm not ready to ask. I just like dancing. Sometimes a dance is just a dance. Alex gave a quiet, knowing smile, turning to leave. After a few steps, he glanced back over his shoulder, voice low but warm, a spark of mischief in it. Sometimes. The word lingered in the air, not heavy but light with promise, playful and daring. And for once, Fira didn't mind losing ground in a contest of words. Then he yawned. Anyway, I'm off to sleep this firewater off before I end up no good to anyone tomorrow. And promptly marched off across the stones, boots crunching quieter as he made distance. She watched him disappear into the tree line and marveled at his ability to switch from humor to flirtation to a show of mundane humanity. She hardly knew this strange man, but she was already fascinated. As the sun rose the next morning, the camp emerged from various earthen and hide-bound dwellings, shifting almost seamlessly into action, despite more than a few hangovers. Men and women gathered weapons, some crude, some remarkably sophisticated for the age. Spears, bows, hand-forged swords, a few hefted axes of beautiful workmanship. Packs were filled, bridles adjusted, saddle straps checked. George stood up, stretching with a groan. "Come on, my boy," he said, nudging Alex with a boot. "There's always one more war. The more things change, the more, etc." Alex muttered, brushing dust off the seat of his combats. As they made their way towards the horse lines, Alex felt a presence fall in beside him. Fira. Her gait was casual but purposeful, hands on her hips. Her eyes glanced sideways at him, as though checking something only she could see. They reached the horses. Fira swung up onto her saddle with effortless grace, barely using the stirrup. Alex followed, more cautious, but managed without making a fool of himself. The big animal shifted under him, testing him with a twitch of its ears and a stomp, but settled quickly. "You ride?" she asked. "I do," Alex replied, though not anything with hooves that big. He motioned toward the shire-sized mounts chewing placidly at feed bags nearby. She let out a sound halfway between a scoff and a laugh. "Good. Be a shame if you fell off. Embarrassing. For you." His horse chose that moment to be skittish and feisty. He cringed inwardly. "I'll do my best not to damage your horse." "My horse is named Arrow, and she wouldn't let you damage her. She's even more trouble than I am." A faint smile played across her lips, just long enough to be seen before it was tucked away again. He didn't clock the shift, consciously, but his whole being responded to it. The way her shoulders relaxed, the subtle turn of her body slightly toward him instead of away. Less guarded, less formal. Where before there had been deliberate distance, now there was a sort of attention. Not overt or obvious, but it was there. Alex found his horse moved like a race car, having initially expected it to be a lumbering big thing. He realized early on that he should ride it with confidence, or it would embarrass and likely injure him. He took it for a ride around the staging field. His horse either fell for his faux confidence, or it was feeling particularly merciful today. "You ride better than I thought you would," remarked Fira, sidling up alongside him on Arrow. "Thanks, I think," Alex replied. "We didn't need horses where I come from." "No horses? What a pity," she said, flicking her braid over her shoulder as she turned the horse toward the gathering war party. Obviously, she thought the simpler life was better. She'd be right. Alex said aloud to himself. This world was beautiful. It was a pity people still had to fight to live in it. Behind them, George mounted up, settling into the saddle like someone who had done this for years. But Sandar was something else entirely. He removed the tack, all the means to control the horse, and swung up onto the beast. It shook its head, and then stood, waiting. He and the horse moved off, as one. George explained to Alex what he was seeing. Sandar links with the horse he is riding. He doesn't need a bridle. Reins. It goes where he tells it. Amazing, isn't it? Alex shook his head in wonder. The Humoi had witnessed this before, but they too still watched in awe. Fiera passed by at that moment, hair in the wind, her hips moving with the canter of her horse, riding proud and wild. Unable to help himself, Alex watched with what he thought was discretion. As George adjusted the straps on his own mount, he leaned sideways toward Alex, just enough for his voice to carry. George said in his dry, matter-of-fact way, with a perfectly timed sigh, "You poor bastard!" Alex blinked. "What?" George just shook his head, giving his reins a flick, trotting ahead. Fira came back around the staging field. The warband was moving out. Already nudging her horse into a trot toward the outbound trail, she passed the Welleses and glanced back over her shoulder. "Coming?" she called. Alex nodded, nudging the sides of the beast with his heels, and followed after the beautiful, free-spirited warrior woman. He was suddenly glad of the painful days spent learning to ride at Uncle Charlie's. George's grin grew as he pulled alongside. "Oh yes, you're in so much trouble," he thought. And he wasn't referring to the coming battle. The war party rode out, some 50-odd men and women, weaving their way down a narrow trail toward the deeper canyons, towards the pits, toward whatever horror waited in the dark.